Well, it's a pleasure to be back with Secretary of State Phil McGrane following our primary election, which is a busy time for your office.
It is, yeah.
So, just overall, how did it go?
It was a good election overall. I think building up to it, I think one of the biggest challenges we see is trying to make sure everything runs smoothly across all 44 counties, and that was one of the tasks this time. We had introduced some change for this election. I think you and I talked about a little bit of it, previously was online candidate filing. So candidates for all offices, including precinct committee positions, could file online through voteidaho.gov. Implementing that, it for the users, hopefully it was an easy experience. That's largely the feedback we got. From our side, it was a big lift to get all 44 counties on the same page. There were a couple hiccups. So like in Valley County, a candidate actually got missed being put on the ballot initially because they had filed in paper when we were trying to get everyone to file online. So there's just little small things like that, but we were able to get them corrected and resolved. And overall, head into election day, it went smooth. Kind of a late election night, but from our perspective, when you look at the results and everything, and in particular, this will be a strange one. This doesn't determine whether it's good or bad. Is very few recounts, which is I expected more recounts this election. So just kind of interesting to see how it all shook out.
So later today, you'll be doing the draw to figure out which places you're going to audit. So, tell me more about that process.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good perspective in terms of how our office works in the election space. The county clerks are the ones, the boots on the ground, doing the real heavy lifting that people think of. They're training the poll workers, setting the polling places, counting the ballots. So back in February, leading into the election, our office is extremely busy with candidate filing and getting everything in place for the election to run smoothly. So all the guidance about party selection and who can select what ballots, making sure all the systems are in place. Then the ball gets handed to the counties. And I always describe election day as the halftime mark. Most people think of it as largely the end, right? If we're following party politics, for example. But for our office, it's really halftime because now, later this afternoon, we will do the post-election audit draws. And so what we're going to do is the counties have all canvassed their results. So the results are official from each of the counties. They've submitted their official results. Their official results are posted on their websites or on voteidaho.gov. And now we're going to randomly draw counties and precincts, specifically 8 counties, that we're going to send teams of auditors to go to those counties, open up the ballot boxes, and do hand counts of randomly selected precincts to compare what our auditors find in terms of their hand count and compare it to the results that were published by the county.
So, when you do that hand count, are you actually counting how many people voted for candidate A or candidate B, and then matching it to the
Yep. So
results?
we'll only select a single race. We're not going to audit the entire ballot, and one it's just very complicated when you get all the different races. So we'll have specific races that we'll audit, and we'll go in and we'll do a complete hand count. And it really doesn't matter if the race is close. Often we'll pick closer races if there are one, just because it's good for people to see that level of transparency. But we'll be comparing an exact hand count to whatever the machines, or it could also be a hand count that was done on election day to see if there's any discrepancies. I'll say what's interesting. We'll usually find 1 or 2 votes, and it's usually like someone just didn't mark the ballot properly. And it's, I can remember from 2024, for example, there was like where it was indented, but the pencil hadn't actually left markings, right? And so you have questions like that. So we'll find some small things, but typically we find that the results match or it's very close. But we also look at their practices in terms of the documentation. How did they keep track of all the records in terms of the ballots that were received? We, in addition to doing the vote count, we compare to the poll books to make sure the number of people who we recorded as having voted aligns with the number of ballots that were being counted. And in the end, the auditors will produce a full report that we publish on Vote Idaho that show any variances. So part of it is just an accountability measure for the counties to determine the system's working, the machines are working, but overall, we're doing all the things that we say we're going to do in advance of the election, that we're actually following through and doing those.
Has there ever been an outcome from one of these audits that was significant?
We've never had huge. The biggest variances we've had are always in the recounts, or if you remember, the really big one was Elmore County last fall. That was by far the biggest thing I've ever experienced, not just in this job, but even when I was at the county clerk's office. We have seen variances. Usually what we've seen, the biggest thing is just some of the practices in terms of if someone were to look up at the post-election audit reports, they would see some of the counties, it's perfect match. There's no findings. We're good. Others they'll see, well, no, we actually have recommendations, and say, just like any good audit, you're like, hey, here are things you could do better. In a few instances, we've actually sent follow-up teams to do some training with the counties to look at their paperwork. I will say most of the findings that we've had have to do with organization, storage of ballots, recording of information, not the actual results not matching. And so we work with them. One of the really good things about the system, and Secretary Denny started doing these audits before me, is largely what we see. Any county that's been audited twice, they do so much better on their second audit. That's not really surprising. You would expect that to be. They learned from it, right? And we provided the training, and the system is continually getting better and better. And that's one of their main focuses, is so that voters can continue to have confidence in the process. And I'll say one of the things that we introduced a couple cycles ago is when we do the draw today, we're not actually going to draw from all 44 counties. So we've filtered out some of the counties for this draw. The top 10 counties can always be selected. That's where the majority of votes are cast in the state. So Ada County is always going to be in the mix, for example, and they have the potential for being audited. The smaller counties, though, once they've been audited in a 4-year period, we pull them out of the audit draw to help ensure that we actually get around the state to all the different counties. We want to make sure that the Clark counties of the world, which is the smallest county in the state, have the potential to actually be drawn and get an audit as well, because it makes the entire system better. And how one county does something, it's important that they're doing it just like the other counties.
Talking about the differences between the way counties handle elections, do you think it's an efficient way to do it, to have 44 different elections offices, and then you're in the state office coordinating it, or would it be more efficient to just have one big elections office statewide?
It would probably be more efficient to have a uniform system statewide, but efficiency is not the only metric in terms of how we're doing things. Anybody who knows the state of Idaho, you follow it extremely well. There's differences among the state in terms of the geography of the state, the density in terms of people and other things. And so I do think the system works well. We don't just see it in the election space. We see it in all forms of government, about being able to have local autonomy, supporting local government and making decisions. I'll give you a really easy example. Clark County and Camas County, those are the two smallest. They have less than 350 registered voters each. It makes sense that they hand count ballots.
Yeah.
It's 350, right? I think the actual vote cast in Clark County this election was 180 votes, right? You can hand count that. In Ada County, that has over 300,000 registered voters, it makes no sense to try and implement the same system. And so there is good reason for it. But at the same time, part of our role is to help steer counties to look at things. I think we've seen changes with a few counties recently, whether it's equipment or others, to better fit their needs because of growth in the communities. One on my radar right now is Idaho County. It's like a small county, but it's bigger than it realizes it is, just in terms of the number of people. And so there's work to be done there. I think actually, a really good and interesting, I guess, social experiment out of it from the 2024 cycle was we had the very hotly contested race between Representative Young and Representative Furman, right? And that went into a full-fledged recount, lawyers present. You had most of the votes cast in Bingham County. That's overwhelmingly the district. But Butte County is also part of that district. Butte County is small, so it's the Arco area. They hand counted. Bingham County uses machines. There was some change in votes. It was very minor, didn't change the outcome of the race. But all of the changes and all the questions came out of Butte County in the hand count. Bingham, with the machine count, was a perfect match, right? And I think those are one of the things, but everyone got to see, it didn't matter which county it was, they got to see it, scrutinize it, and show that the systems are working. And so it's just part of the whole mix of how we run elections here.
I do see a lot of skepticism of machines still.
Of course, there are people. That's part of where these audits today are so important, is to address those concerns and to do the random audits of hand counts and let the public in to see them. We will have places where people will show up and watch, and we welcome it.
So shifting gears a little bit, you're in something of an unenviable position of being sued by Harmeet Dillon.
Sure, yes.
So explain what's going on there and why you've chosen the position you have.
Yeah, so to give a little background for those who aren't familiar, so our office has been sued by the Department of Justice related to voter roll maintenance. The Department of Justice has actually sued, I think, 30 states at this point in time, looking for voter roll information. We got a request last August asking for the entire voter rolls for the state of Idaho. Within 2 weeks, we provided the entire list for the state of Idaho. So we provided the same voter list that you're very familiar with and others are. Every registered voter. We've been working closely with Department of Homeland Security on our voter roll maintenance efforts. We've actually helped build the SAVE system, working with DHS in that process. The thing that we didn't provide to the Department of Justice was dates of birth, social security number, and driver's license. Every other piece of information we've shared, just not that personal identifying information. And going back and forth for months with them really wanting it. We believe they have the information they need to do the work that they're saying that they want to do. And Idaho law doesn't authorize me to share that information. I'm prohibited. I have to protect certain voter information. I can't give it to you. I can't give it to anybody else. So we've protected it. In our back and forth, ultimately, Department of Justice has been pretty aggressive about these cases, and so they filed a lawsuit. Ours is still sitting in the court system. Our hearing's been punted to the end of June. We'll watch it. But I feel really good. Throughout the process, I think it's important to note, I've consulted with the Attorney General. So Raul is very familiar with it, his office. We've worked together to both review Idaho law as well as federal law to determine what is Department of Justice eligible to have, what are they not. And more importantly, it's less about the suit and more just making sure we are doing the voter roll maintenance. One of the things, if you listen to the Department of Justice, they're focused on making sure no non-citizens are voting. You and I have talked about that before. We did a huge effort leading into the 2024 presidential election with the Only Citizens Can Vote Act to do a verification with DHS to make sure there were no non-citizens on our rolls. And we identified 11 cases that ironically were turned over from ISP to the Department of Justice for prosecution that we're still awaiting prosecution from DOJ. So there's a little, and you can see that in our correspondence, a little push and pull on both sides saying like, wait, what are you checking here? We've given you exactly what you want. Now go do something with it. Let's hold people accountable.
So, yeah, that's the narrative I'm seeing online is that it's something to do with illegal voters and such.
That's what everyone's worried about, and we are doing work on that. I want to reassure anybody who's watching or listening. We've been very proactive. Again, before the presidential election in 2024, we did a full effort to compare every registered voter in the state of Idaho to ensure that we can validate citizenship information. And we now have built in processes where we continue to do it. And to the point of, I was invited back, it was May of 2025, to the White House to consult with DHS and Social Security Administration on how to improve the system based on the work we were doing headed into it. So we've been very active working with DHS. The DOJ efforts are separate from the White House and separate from DHS. And so that's part of it too, is we feel like we're in the good graces with the White House. To put it, I was shared because it surprises people. I think you know this. I was at the White House for St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. Heck, recently I was invited to go to the UFC fight for personal reasons. I can't make it. I wish I could get over there. I feel like I've got a great relationship with the administration. And so I know online it can look like this is all one simple thing. Like these are different groups for different reasons. And I feel pretty comfortable in terms of the suit, how we'll end up as a state.
One more question. Following the results of the elections, I've seen a lot of conservative activists talk about moving from a primary system to a caucus system. I think that's going to be a big topic at the upcoming Republican State Convention. Obviously, there are many different ways we can choose our nominees for the general election. Do you think the way we have now is the ideal way to do it, or is there anything that could be changed to make it more responsive or more participatory? Whatever your metrics are for what a successful primary is.
It's a great question, and I hope that at least there's the opportunity. Obviously, one of the things that's playing out in that dialogue is it doesn't matter what stripe you're coming from. It's a preference to win, right? Like this is a competitive space. That anyone who's denying that is an aspect of it. But I think there's also an element of just the philosophical, what are we trying to do here? And I think this year in particular, headed into America 250 and the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, part of what the Declaration is about is self-governance and us actually participating in the selection of our leaders, because when we were on English colonies, we weren't doing that. And for me, participation is a big factor, right? The primary system is good. Is our current system the best? I'll say not necessarily. One of the things, the unenviable spots for me is I'm always trying to get engagement and get people to participate. You and I both know this. We still have, 30% turnout? Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that we will debate, and there are people pointing to different things, is just the crossover voting or people participating in the primaries. One of the things, we don't even get the majority of Republicans to show up. But like that, set aside the crossover votes, like just the majority, how do we get more people to show up? Because the party is stronger when people are engaged, not just waiting till the general election. And as a party, we're feeling it. We need participation in our primaries headed into it, especially in a super majority Republican state. So my concern would be with the caucus system. Other states have done it. It limits the people who are participating. So I'm not in favor of that. But is our current system flawless? No. I think anything we can do to get more people engaged who share the values and speak for it, because I think you see the masses. When you look at the general election and you look at President Trump's numbers, I think that's a good bellwether for us, is when who's voting for the Republican candidate for president is a good marker of what does the Republican population look like in our state, right? Because by that point, people are being pretty sincere about their opinions. And so hopefully we can come up with a system or make small tweaks that help get us there and get more people involved.
Well, as a follow up to that, I was looking at the historical primary election turnout on the Secretary of State's website, and this year was about 30%. Previous years, with more competitive statewide primaries, obviously you were unopposed and others were as well, so it didn't draw as many people. But even so, the really competitive ones only got 34, 35%. What else can we do to get people to turn out for a primary?
There's something that's interesting, and I think it's happening more broadly than just us, of like the people you and I talk to that are very politically engaged and follow all of this, and then the general population who just think about voting in November. Voting, regardless of how exciting the ballot is or isn't, more people will show up in November than show up in the primary. And I do think there's merit to looking at even the date and timing of our election. I have proposed to the legislature, do we move it slightly to try and make it more predictable? I don't know that predictability is the only thing. Obviously, like, we had our TV ads up and our radio ads running, encouraging people to vote that the primary was coming. We will do the same for the general election. I don't know exactly what the right metric is. I will say turnout at 30% was higher than I expected, which is great. But 30% is still 30%. I think that's the important thing. And when you look at by party, it still is not that great of numbers. And like, how do we get more, especially when you're talking about nominees, how do we get more people involved making these determinations?
Yeah, in most districts, as far as the legislature goes, this is and statewide, this is the real election. So
for sure.
I wish people would realize that.
I wish people would realize that, and they would feel better about it, right? Like having a say in the process. But even if it was a presidential primary, we see better numbers than we do for the state primary, but not that much better than we do for the general election. And these decisions have consequences, especially when the legislature is the makeup it is. I think everyone feels it. So if you figure out the cure, or if anybody else has ideas, I'm always open ears. Anything we can do to get more people engaged.
Well, I appreciate your time. Where else, if people have questions about voting or elections or post-election audits, where can they go?
Voteidaho.gov. We've continued to build that site. We're going to keep building on it to make it the easy resource for all voting information. Whether you want to look up past turnout for primary elections like you do, or geek out. I know you're one of those like me who likes to geek out on all the data and stuff. Or you just need to know how to register, vote, and get involved. Like, this is an easy place, voteidaho.gov.
Secretary McGrane, thank you for your time.
Thank you.